service this morning. Mike, you mentioned contract. It's really not a contractual relationship we have. It's a covenant. It's a covenant. And even though I will no longer be your minister after June 30th, we all share the same covenant as long as we belong to this religious tradition of Unitarian Universalism. And Mike, I want to say I went to a lot of places, but I couldn't have gone those places without you personally, and without this community. And I'll reflect more on that as I talk about the shared ministry. Markley, you made me cry with those stories about Isidore, my friend from Rwanda. You brought that back vividly. And the story about the dog soup in Korea. Well, you didn't finish the story, so I feel like I need to finish it. The dog soup, what I learned is that the Korean people love dogs. They treasured dogs because the dogs sustained them. The dogs kept them alive in their long history of invasion when they had to run for their lives and leave their farms because invaders were conquering their lands. The Korean people ran to the hills and the dogs could run with them. And the dogs became their food. They learned to eat the dogs to stay alive. And that's the part that I didn't understand when I first heard that the Koreans eat dog soup. But once I understood the context, it just changed my perception. And isn't that life? Well, I thought I might get choked up and not be able to speak, so I brought pictures to share. And I'll share those in a minute. I want to reflect on what have we done? What have we done? For 10 years, what have we done? Well, we have shown up, we have spoken up, and we have worked. And sometimes we've gotten worked up with each other, with the larger community, with our president. We've gotten worked up together. But we have worked. And I think most importantly, we've done the work of ministry. And that's the work that's ours to do as a religious community. And I have a few words I want to share about ministry. But first, I want to show you some pictures that I've saved that illustrate the ministry that we have shared rather well, I think. Okay. Let me start at the beginning. And you know, as I go through these pictures, it brought tears to my eyes. we look at these pictures, there's always faces we see that are no longer with us. Some have passed on, some have moved on. And that's what makes us a living tradition, a moving tradition. Yes, I did take you with me to Afghanistan. This is the congregation at Kandahar, not Bagram. I brought my robe. I brought my robe all the way to Afghanistan. It was the robe I was ordained in, Markley, the robe you touched at my ordination. And it kept me grounded in community. It kept me grounded in the UUCRT. It kept me grounded in Unitarian Universalism. We got that banner and we carried it to New York City. We carried it to the United Nations, through the streets. We stood with Black Lives Matter, except when we didn't. That's me there to the left with that black hat on. We weathered the retaliation together. Remember that? Some of us do. Showed up in DC, you supported me in my bike ride for Interfaith Power and Light. That's me, fourth from the right. I rode my bike there from Philadelphia. That was my sabbatical. I was only able to do that because of you. We showed up at the White House. This was a meeting with the National Security Council at the Eisenhower office building. I only got there because of you. We spoke up about drones, and some people got fed up. I remember Ann Beck. While I was in the sanctuary, she was cursing me in the kitchen. We showed up at Honeywell. Yes, at the shareholder meetings. Remember, some of you contributed and I purchased a share of Honeywell so I could go make a ruckus. Showed up for our neighbors in the city of Newburgh, building houses, a habitat for humanity. Showed up speaking to seminaries, colleges, congregations. We showed up for our immigrants who were being rounded up by ICE and chased out. And we showed up for our Muslim neighbors. This is at the mosque in the city of Newburgh. Yes, and we showed up in the mountains of Nicaragua to show our solidarity with the coffee farmers and our commitment to fair trade. And we showed up at Standing Rock in the Dakotas. You sent me there. I took this banner and I hung it at the camp. We showed up for our community when they were grieving. These were the Marines from Stewart Air Base who perished in the crash. And the community poured into our sanctuary with the news cameras and the candles. In my 10 years, I never saw so many people at the UCRT than that night when we had our vigil. We showed up at Temple Hill on Memorial Day, year after year, to remember what we wanted to forget, but wouldn't allow ourselves to. We showed up for vaccines. We showed up to get vaccinated ourselves, and in the midst of pandemic, we showed up for our neighbors. We showed up to vote and to ensure that other people could exercise their right to vote. This is me as a voter guardian. I couldn't resist. I had to show this picture. We even showed up to carry the tote bags of our Republican neighbors who voted for Trump. This is me caught holding the bag. She needed a hand, okay? I wasn't going to say no. We showed up to officiate weddings where other clergy wouldn't show up. This is me marrying two men at West Point in the Cadet Chapel. We showed up for nights out. And I showed up as the minister at West Point. People who'd been Unitarian, who wanted a Unitarian, were able to reach out to me because I was at Rock Tavern. I was nearby. This is the West Point Seminary, burying a Unitarian graduate. His cremains are in my hands. And sometimes we showed up for a beer. So what have we done? We've shown up, we've spoken up, and we've gotten worked up, mostly in a good way. And as I said at the beginning, the work we've done is the work of ministry. I remember one event I was at some evening at Rock Tavern, and there were people from the community there, and somebody was introducing me to their mother or their aunt, who was a devout Christian. And I introduced myself. I said, I'm the minister. And this person said, what do you minister? And I thought, well, that's a really good question. And because I had been forewarned where she was coming from as a member of this particular church, I knew she was fishing for something. She wanted to know if I was a minister of the gospel. But I thought for a moment and I said, well, I'm a minister of religion, our religion, the Unitarian Universalist tradition. And that is the work of our shared ministry, the work of ministering a tradition that we're entrusted with, that we're stewards over. The work of ministry involves the work of theological reflection, connecting to teaching, scriptures as well as traditions, but also connecting to our life experience and the wisdom from that, and other resources of truth, like the findings of science. Exploring them together, arriving at insight that gives us guidance for living. This is the work of ministry. It's the work of theological reflection. We have done the work of theological reflection. The work of ministry is also the work of spiritual discipline. We've done the work of spiritual discipline. When I say spiritual discipline, I'm talking about study. We've studied together. We've prayed. We've meditated. Some of us have fasted. We've served. We've gathered in worship. We've celebrated together. We've confessed our shortcomings together. We've also grieved and lamented our losses together. This is the work of spiritual discipline. This is the work of ministry. And it's the way we provide spiritual care to each other and to the world. Finally, the work of ministry is the work of moral engagement. This is the work. This is what we've done. Moral engagement has three dimensions. Experiencing moral emotions, feeling grateful, feeling proud when it's appropriate, but also feeling disgust, feeling outrage, and even sometimes a bit of guilt. Experiencing moral emotions is part of moral engagement. Also, embodying moral values. This is the work that we've done, that we've been striving to do. Embodying the values that are at the heart of our religious community. Respect, responsibility, fairness, honesty, compassion. And finally, the work of moral engagement is acting with moral courage. Showing up, speaking up, and acting in service to our values. This is the work we've done. This is what we have done. We have shown up for each other at hospitals, in our homes, sometimes at weddings or at funerals, in cemeteries. We've shown up for each other each Sunday. Even when we didn't want to show up, we showed up out of our commitment to our covenant and to this community. But we didn't stop there. We showed up for our community in Newburgh, in Orange County, and beyond. We showed up for the disenfranchised, the immigrant, those who've been stigmatized because of their race or gender identity or sexual orientation or citizenship status. And we spoke up for those who didn't have a voice or whose voice couldn't be heard. So when I think about what we've done for 10 years, I'm left with an abiding sense that we've done well. And I'm grateful for that and for you.